The elections of 1866 were off-year elections. They were midterm elections, meaning that all of the House of Representatives and a third of the Senate were up for re-election, while the President of the United States was not. President Andrew Johnson is going to go and take the opportunity to go and campaign to get people to basically support those that would support his agenda. Not a good idea. The point is that by the time you get to the 1866 election, Republicans will win 2/3 of both houses of Congress. Johnson has lost completely. Once you have that kind of majority in Congress, you can override Johnson on anything. So by the time you get to the spring of 1867, Johnson lost complete control of Reconstruction. As to why Johnson lost control, let's look at it. It's partly due to the fact that he was a terrible politician, and partly due to the pressure being applied by Stevens and Sumner. Also, what about the attitude of the South? By passing measures like the Black Codes, weren't they just playing into the radical Republicans' hands? And finally, what deep issue did Johnson lose and Congress win? The freedmen. They were the keys to the victory that allowed presidential Reconstruction to end and congressional Reconstruction to begin. In 1867, Congress will pass a series of laws known as the Reconstruction Acts, where they basically put every southern state, with the exception of Tennessee, back at the starting point. Basically a gigantic reset button. Start the whole thing over. And by the way, while this was going on, Johnson was vetoing everything Congress sent him, but Congress just simply overrode his veto every time. Congress was also passing some laws to ensure that Johnson would not interfere with their plans. They were also setting up Johnson to fall, particularly making the trap that only he would be stupid enough to fall for. This trap is going to be known as the Tenure of Office Act. Congress said that any official that's appointed by the president that needs to be confirmed when he's appointed also needs to be confirmed when it comes to being fired, because Johnson was routinely firing cabinet members. This would effectively make the President of the United States completely unable to control his cabinet. He can't fire anybody he cannot work with. What this also means is that if Johnson tries to fire somebody, Congress can accuse him of breaking the law and attempt to impeach him. Now, would Johnson fall for the trap? Of course he would. In February of 1868, Johnson tries to get rid of his Secretary of War, Edward Stanton. Stanton was more loyal to the members of the Congress than he was to the president. Senators, of course, did not approve of Stanton's firing, yet Johnson is going to do it anyway. In fact, he is going to appoint an army officer to replace him. Stanton, of course, is going to basically resist him being removed, in fact, barricade himself in the office. However, Congress basically has this trap sprung by Johnson. And basically, he is now going to be impeached. Now, what does impeachment mean? Impeachment is a political indictment. You are accused of high crimes or misdemeanors, and now you're going to have a trial. Just like, for example, if I were to rob a store and I would be arrested, I would first be indicted. I wouldn't be going to jail. I would be indicted, accused of that crime. That's what impeachment is. After you're impeached, you need to be tried and then either convicted or acquitted. Now, when it comes to the U.S. Constitution, the House of Representatives draws up the charges against whoever is going to be impeached. In this case, it would be Andrew Johnson. And then the Senate would be the one who would decide the guilt or innocence of that person by a 2/3 majority vote. So the House of Representatives voted to impeach Johnson on 11 different charges. One of them was bringing Congress into disrepute. But this main charge was a violation of the Tenure of Office Act. He fired Stanton, or tried to fire Stanton, without senatorial approval, in violation of the Tenure of Office Act. Now, the leader of the impeachment process was Thaddeus Stevens. And by the way, by the time we get to March of 68, how much longer do you think Johnson's term was going to last? Only one more year. Remember that Inauguration Day back then was in March, not in January as it is today. Nevertheless, they are going to have a trial. And they're going to and the senators are going to listen to the evidence on both the prosecution and the defense teams. And it goes on for months. Finally, they get around to taking a vote. Now, all it needs is basically all you need to do is convict him on one count, and there's 11 counts for him to be charged with. But you need 2/3 votes. That means that you need 36 votes in the Senate at the time. They took a vote on the Tenure of Office Act, and they came up to 35 guilty, 19 not guilty. which means that he has actually been acquitted by 1 vote, because you need 36 to convict. Now, of the 19 that voted no, 12 were Democrats. For the Republicans, all they needed to do was bring over one of their own from the 7 Republicans that voted no. So they do basically a revote to get all the other counts against Johnson. And again, same result, 35-19. At this point, Johnson had been impeached but not convicted. In fact, he was acquitted by just 1 vote. The impeachment of Andrew Johnson is going to have enormous effects when it comes to the presidency. For example, name a president between Andrew Johnson and, say, Teddy Roosevelt. It's pretty hard to do. It's, if you don't already have the presidential order in mind. The reason why is because of the fact that Congress is going to take over, and we're going to have a series of weak presidents all the way pretty much until we get to President McKinley or Theodore Roosevelt. A long space of time where we have unremarkable presidents as our chief executive.